Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the participants as we continue our 2 week online evening course under the National Capacity Building Program on Research and Publications, organized by the Department of Electrical, Electronics and Communication Engineering, Indian Institute of Technology, Dharwad. It is truly wonderful to see your continued enthusiasm as we move ahead with more insightful sessions. Today, we are honored to welcome an eminent academician and researcher, Dr. Sridhar Iyer, who will be guiding us through two essential areas: research ethics, especially academic honesty and integrity, the roles and responsibilities of a PhD guide. Dr. Sridhar Iyer is a senior member of IEEE with an MS in Electrical Engineering from New Mexico State University, USA, and a PhD from Delhi University. His remarkable contributions have earned him several prestigious recognitions, including the Young Scientist Award from SERB DST, the Young Researcher Award from the Institute of Scholars, and the IEEE Communication Society Protsahan Award for 3 consecutive years. He has an extensive research portfolio with over 100 publications in reputed international journals such as IEEE Springer, Elsevier, Wiley, and more than 50 conference papers presented at major IEEE venues, including IEEE ANDS, NCC, and SPCOM. He has also authored two books, the most recent title, Intelligent Spectrum Management Towards 6G, published by IEEE Wiley in 2025. Dr. Sridhar Iyer actively contributes to the global research community as a reviewer for SERB TSD, Government of India, the Royal Society UK, and several international journals and conferences. He also serves as an editorial board member for scientific reports and multiple Springer journals. His current research interests include semantic communications and spectrum enhancement techniques for intelligent wireless systems. Currently, he is the professor and head of the Department of ECE at SGBIT, Belagavi, Karnataka. With great pleasure, I invite Dr. Sridhar Iyer to take over the session.
Thank you, Namrata. And thank you, Rahul sir, for having me. I hope I'm audible.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I was thanking Rahul sir for having me again. We had done this last time, and he had invited me time as well. And I'm very happy to see the number of people who have joined here. He informed me it's almost double. So looks like there's great interest in this online course. So thank you again, sir, for having me. So as Namrata, be talking about two important things. One is, as you can see on the slide, the academic honesty and integrity, and the subsequent one will be the roles and responsibilities of a PhD guide. Therein, I will also be highlighting the roles and responsibilities of a PhD student because it all goes hand in hand. So that will be mostly after a short break after this particular session. So most of the participants who are here, I would assume, are also faculty members, maybe at a starting level or mid level or even at a seniority level. So we need to have a lot of honesty as well as integrity, both in terms of academics as well as the research. So just before I go into these presentations, I just want to throw out this disclaimer that whatever I'm going to present here is solely based on my experience. The practices, of course, I think most of you will know that research practices in general will vary, as per the experience, and different people have their own ways of, going about the research and academics. For example, some people start with the abstract of a paper, some people start with the conclusion, introduction. So these practices vary, but I'm just going to share the experiences which I have. Hopefully it will help you in going about your academics as well as the research. So please use your judgment and regarding the suitability of the content. So how do we navigate through this landscape of research and academic integrity? What exactly does this mean? Mostly people would assume that this is very theoretical, and as we get experience, we'll go about it. But then it's always good to have a background knowledge of or and information regarding these practices. So once I go into an academic, let's say as a young researcher, a PhD researcher, or even as a faculty, if some people are doing, part-time PhD, as they say, then you're going to go into a scenario which could be a little complex, because you may not know if you are completely into academics or you are into research. It's a mix of both. And I think all of us will agree that this landscape is evolving. So teaching is not as it used to be a decade ago, which was mostly classroom driven, whereas now it is not classroom driven. It's more outside the class driven. So it's evolving, and with that, we also need to evolve. Otherwise, we are left behind, and always struggling to make a mark. So a lot of integrity in that case is required. Uh, with this, we need to understand a lot of principles, mostly the responsibilities that we have as a faculty and as well as a researcher. And so therefore we can maintain like the highest standard which is required. So just to give you an example, we would have heard that IITs usually go with only transaction articles. They don't look below a transaction article. So that's something where you're maintaining a standard. There could be some places which say, I need only SCI journals with certain quartiles. So that is kind of the standard which a particular academic institution is setting. So we need to follow those, and those and following those is what will help us in reaching whatever goals we have. So this is mainly important for a younger faculty or a researcher who gets into these domains. So, what are these research ethics? In my experience, when I talk about the research ethics, mostly people think about only research papers in general, but it's much more than that. Uh, right now, in the area of, or when data has become so important, uh, to me, I think ethics revolves more around the data. uh, there's also a lot of openness about the data, openness about the code. There are also certain reviews, some journals which offer open reviews. So the reviews by the reviewers are also open. So there's a lot of openness about these things, and therefore the ethics need to be followed. So it's not just about a paper publication where we talk about ethics, but it's much more than that. There are certain domains where we need to get data from, let's say, human beings. We are also dealing with data of animals and other types of data where a lot of confidentiality is required. That data is very sensitive, so we need to really understand how to use this data, how to store this data, and how to share this data. So I will be talking about this data and how to manage this data a little later. But research ethics also involves these kind of aspects. So basically, we need to conduct this research with ensuring that whoever is involved, not just human beings, but if there's other kind of, let's say, animals or other kind of data also involved, then we need to ensure that this is being done in a proper ethical manner, so that we are basically going to advance the society. That's the whole idea of research. So we are not just advancing our own, let's say, CV or resume, but through that we are also advancing the society. Most of us would be from a tech background. So yeah, we are advancing technology, but that is going to be used for the advancement of the society. So we need to do this, uh, ensuring all of this ideas which are on this slide. Of course, there are some aspects related to rights as well as dignity. I will be highlighting that a little later. So, why are these ethics important? I think most of us know it already, but then it's always good to highlight these important points. And you would see on the slide that I have put a lot of red words, because these are some of the key words, the key takeaways from this. So, we are really looking at honesty, integrity, and respect for others, because research involves all of that. So, uh, what are we basically looking at when we are doing a lot of research? Most of the time, while doing the research, we are so involved in the study that I won't say we ignore these aspects, but these aspects don't come in our mind. But it's always good to know about this, especially when we are guiding the students. because students are new to the research world, but we as a guide very important in doing this. So if there are participants involved in the research, then we must ensure that there's no harm done to those participants, or there's no kind of exploitation of or harassment of those participants. So it's like if you're taking a feedback on something, it should not be a manipulated feedback. It should be a honest feedback, because that feedback will be going as a part of your research. So I mean, I'm just talking generally. There could be researches, some of your research which could involve taking feedback from people or taking some data from the people. So we must ensure that this doesn't lead to any kind of exploitation or any harm to the people. The integrity has to be maintained. So whatever are the findings, they need to be reliable. So there are some researches which I have seen, and I'm sure you may also have come across, where your research does not follow the trend which is already established. So it is kind of doing away with that. So therefore, there is a big question mark on the reliability of those findings. So it's like, let's say, if X increases, Y increases. This is already established in the literature, but then you're trying to force a result which is doing the opposite. So that's not kind of reliable. Of course, if you are able to prove it, then yeah, it could be taken forward. But in general, if your findings are not reliable or valid in that case, then there's a big question mark on the integrity part. Uh, so therefore, this leads to the trust and credibility issues, and then there's a lot of subsequent issues if the trust and credibility is questioned in that case. So we need to ensure that all of this is being done, and I'm talking about this not just in terms of research but also in terms of the academic part. So when we just as an example, let's say we are evaluating some papers, exam papers. It needs to be done properly, and I'm sure all of us are aware of the scheme to be done for a question paper and those things, and so that needs to be followed, not be done in an arbitrarily or erratic way. That leads to a lot of questions. So I'll touch upon what is academic integrity here. It will be a mix of both research as well as academics here. So basically, with the academic integrity, you want to promote honesty. There should be fairness in the evaluation, in all regards of the academic work. You want to be fair in all regards, in terms of evaluation, the teaching part, the promotion part, the salary component. That fairness needs to be there. So if you it with the research part, then you're basically talking about acknowledging the contribution of other people, and how to have really good standards in terms of the research aspect, and also how do you reference the other sources. So I'm sure all of us would be aware of this. So if you mix this academics with the research part, then these things need to be uh, followed. So why are we even talking about this academic integrity? Why is it so important? One of the points is that it builds trust. It also builds the honesty part in the academics, within the academic community. When you meet these academicians, let's say in a conference, for example, then you have already had this established trust and honesty, and then you can always collaborate and then take your academics as well as the research forward. So that's the first step that we take. You're able to build a strong foundation, and this is exactly what I was mentioning, which will be for your success in academics. That is, building your CV, your resume, and then when you're in whichever department or school you're working, as well as whichever institution you are affiliated to, it helps that institution as well as school or department. So that honesty and integrity is required. uh, Contributing to the knowledge, this brings us back to the reliability and the trust of the results which we have obtained, which will help us in maintaining uh, the knowledge factor which we want to extend. So many of us do the study which is an extension of what already is available in the literature. So whatever is already established in the literature, and we are just extending it, but the base of what we are doing remains the same. So it is already established, it's already there. So we are just building upon it. Therefore, these findings need to be reliable. So I think most of the research, most of us who are doing the research, who already know what is the trend of the result or how the results would look like, you know, but we are just trying to find those numerics in those results, in the plots or the table. So these results need to be reliable, so to say. And then, of course, if there's a lot of misconduct, I think everyone is aware of this. Then, as a student, I don't know how much of this is there in India in the sense of grades, but then at least I know in abroad they are very, very serious about it, and it leads to failing grades. There have been cases of suspension as well. So, and now in India again, we have been recently we've been very serious on this. So it's better not to do any of these kind of things, which leads to any misconduct. So, what are the core principles? Again, I come back to that, which is honesty, integrity, and then the respect for others. So, there are some key takeaways from this. The one is beneficence, which is basically how your research is going to benefit the society without causing any harm to any participants, any individuals. So, the design and methodology which we have for our research, it needs to be very carefully done. Okay, it should not be something that is just thrown out without any uh, you know brainstorming, so to say. So this is very, very important. I have in my experience seen that usually some researchers do not really pay attention to this, and they are mostly involved in the study. It could have some serious issues at the end. It's good to look at this idea when you're designing or having a what are the risks which are involved, and so that later you're not really struggling. uh, the other fact is the other idea is known as non-maleficence, which is basically we are obligated to do no harm to anybody. So this is mostly for those results, where we are using human participants or maybe data from the animals or environment, medical data, which is very, very sensitive. So we should not be causing any kind of harm in terms of physical or social to the participants, even psychological harms. So this kind of a research is a very sensitive research, and it needs to be done very sensitively. So if you are involved in any kind of research and academics of this kind, it's always good to be very, very careful during the design and what exactly is required. uh, Please do not take data which is not required and then just store it. It could be a problem. It's always good to take only that data from people which is which is required. Don't take any extra kind of data from them. Next is about the justice, the fairness. This is something which has come about very lately, where a good example of this is the authorship in a paper. Where uh, there could be, let's say, just for an example, students have done some work, but then it's very questionable where they are placed in the authorship. There could be money involved in the research, and then what is the equity of that? How is it spread across the participants, researchers? So these are some of the things which need to be considered. Fairness. So my experience, I'd share my experience. So whenever I start any article with students or with my collaborators, uh, the first step there is I always make it very clear, like what would be the position of the authorship, what would be the contribution which is required. So it establishes a good trust, especially with my collaborators, because it's a long-term project. And of course with the students these days, because students are really aware. So so I always let them know, like, where they would be in terms of the authorship position, what would be their contribution. So it's always good to do that, but of course in a general way, uh, the research needs to be distributed fairly. Whatever is the outcome of that, monetary, non-monetary, that needs to be distributed evenly and fairly. Confidentiality, I think this is very, very important these days in terms of because we are really, our research is data driven these days, especially if you're using AI and those things. So it's all about the data. We are always in terms of data. So confidentiality is prime. So how do you protect the privacy, and uh, how do you save them? How do you share them, the data? who is the recipient, how long are you going to store data, if you're going to get rid of the data, how are you actually going to do it. So there's a lot of things involved around the data, so I've just put it in terms of confidentiality. So if you're AI based researcher, uh, I would really strongly suggest to pay a lot of attention to this confidentiality. It could lead to serious outcomes later on. So please be very careful in terms of handling the data. Next is about the integrity. So the researchers are accountable for all aspects of the research. So if there are participants who have got grants, for example, from some granting agency, then you know that you are whole and sole responsible for that duration of the project, and even 1 rupee spent on the grant is completely your responsibility. So that's the integrity part here. And of course, with the auditing of the grant, you need to be very transparent. So there's no non-transparency involved there. So this kind of research, if you are doing in terms of grants and handling lakhs or crores of money from certain agencies, or even seed money from your institute, then that transparency needs to be there. So the research per se, then you need to report your findings, acknowledge the contribution of others, and any conflict of interest which you have. So I think if there are researchers who have been submitting to journals and conferences, then you need to include this conflict of interest declaration. There are other declarations as well. These days, lately, you have to declare about the use of AI tools. If any of your content has been generated through AI tools, I think we had a couple of questions at the start about the AI tools. So it's always good to be very around that, not to hide anything. Uh, Especially if you are doing or if you are throwing out your initial work in terms of preprints, which I do, uh, then in that case you have to be absolutely transparent, because your preprint is out for the public, so to say, before even it's accepted in any journal. So we need to be very very careful in that case. All your conflict of interest, contribution, your findings, they need to be very very transparent. So is any kind of approval required? Well, in my experience, I haven't seen many uh, Indian universities, institutions uh, do this kind of ethics approval. Of course, I have seen few, uh, especially, but in my area of research, it's not much required. But there are research ethics committees where your approval would be required. So you go and declare this is how your research would be, and then the committee looks whether any kind of approvals are required. Need to get these approvals and then begin your research. Once you conclude your research, you need to give them all the findings and how you have shared the data and everything. So if your research is into any of that which requires ethics approval, then do that. I would assume biotechnology, biomedical, these kind of areas would require ethics approval. So an institution should have an ethics committee, and that committee should then look into these aspects and then give an approval or a non-approval, and then only your research could be could get a go ahead. So uh, for example, if you're using some kind of medical data, then you need to get the consent, how you're going to store all this data. Is it going to cause any harm? If at all, what would be the harm, and how would you avoid it? So those kind of things is what the ethics approval would look at. So I've seen abroad, these kind of ethics approval committees are always formed in universities. They are also there within schools. I've seen it in few of the IITs as well. So if you are into any institution, I mean any research which requires this, then uh, please get approval before you start your research. So this helps us maintain, again, back to the integrity part, so that all your results which you're getting, obtaining and throwing out to the public, we know that it is reliable, it has no bias, there's no misconduct there, and everything is smooth. Then if any of your research requires any kind of regulation, it ensures that you're following those regulations. So again, I would take the example of biotech, biomedical. So there are a lot of regulations which you need to follow. There could be some research where legality comes into the picture. So it will this committee or this ethics approval will ensure that you are legally good to go as well as ethically you are good to go. So uh, there are some researches I have seen where there are protection laws, so I have seen this in sociology. So there are some laws of protection. So this ethics approval would also ensure that you get a go ahead in terms of that. So I don't know if the participants, any of you are from that background, but if you are, then please do that. Technologically, in my research area, not much of this is required. But if you are from any of that area where it is required, so please go ahead. So this is the other part. You get your safety protocols done, any risk assessment. So there are these committee will really evaluate all of that, give you a go ahead, and the researcher and his or her team is then low on the risk part, or having no risk in doing the research which you want to do. uh, because you are doing the research for the society, it also helps in terms of social responsibility. Whoever are your stakeholders in the research, they are sure that your research is ethical as well as it is very transparent in the way that you have done the research. So uh, basically, till now, whatever we have seen comes down to maintaining the integrity of the academics as well as the research. If there are any laws and regulations which your research needs to follow, then you're also able to meet that. If you're really unsure about ethics which are required in your research, then make sure that you ask in your institution or your school or department. If you're a PhD student, then it's best to consult with your supervisor if you need this ethics approval, and if there is a research ethics committee at your institution or school, and then that's the best way to go about it. So this is what should the research ethics approval would look like. It will look at your planning. It will look at the planning and design of your research. It would. I'm just throwing out the basics. If there are any sensitive topics involved, any potential conflicts of interest. There are many cases where, for example, I think most of us would be aware where the reviews of the articles are being done by people who have worked together. It has been, it not been able to identify that, and it's just gone through. So those kind of things would be checked by this committee, and you would obtain an approval on that. So I'm letting you know here how this works, especially abroad. There are a few IITs which also work through this. So you need to have an ethics application. You submit this application. Uh, so as we submit to a grant or an agency, you need to state your objective, what would be your method, if there is any recruitment like a JRF, SRF, and you do that, what are the procedures for consent which are required? If there are any data management plans, I will come to this DMP, data management plan, because we are completely now AI ML driven, in most of the research areas. So I'll give you an idea of this DMP, the data management plan. If there are any risk involved, and how would you mitigate? So there's a general bullets of what an ethics application would comprise of. Then your ethics committee is going to review this. uh, it will look at the ethical implications, and it would then see that whatever you have submitted is in line with the ethics policy of the university or institute or the school, and then it is following those regulations. And then you get a feedback. uh, it is approved, more information is required, or if it is rejected. So this usually happens abroad. And so when I was pursuing my master, master before I started my thesis, this was required from our research group. And because we were involved in the vehicular uh, domain, vehicular technology, it was obviously approved because we didn't have any risk and we were not getting any feedback. But I had seen some applications through sociology, psychology, where this was very, very rigorous. So if your research is into that, then please ensure that this ethics is being followed properly. So if it gets rejected or more information is required, you need to make an amendment, or how you would monitor your research and those kind of things. So as it would happen, different universities and or institutions or schools name it a different have a different name for it. You have in some places called a doctoral committee or a research committee. So whatever is the name of this committee will also be monitoring the progress of your research and will ensure that you're doing it in the most ethical way. So this brings me to a very important aspect, I believe, which is data. And so just going to throw out how can we manage this data. And I'm sharing my experience of data. I don't do much of AI machine learning, so my research is not data driven, but I do generate data from the simulations which I conduct in my research areas, and I always store this data. So I'm just going to share my experience on how you can build uh, or how you can manage this data. For those of you who are involved in uh, a lot of data, if you're picking up data from websites or uh, you know GitHub, for example, or any other source, or generating your own data, through sensors, or how you can manage this data. So uh, basically you can make this data and its management as a tool, and how you can manage this through the entire research. So it is basically a document, I believe, uh, and describes how you will collect, process, and store this data. Initially, it looks like it's empty because you will not have much of the data. But then, as you progress in your research, by the end of it, if I'm talking in terms of a PhD student, assuming he goes for a 5 years doctoral program, then at the end, this document is just going to be filled up because you would have generated so much of data. And then you can always play around that data and access the data which you have generated yourself, and see how you can go about and generate new research out of it. So it's basically this document. If you have it properly done, then you will have a roadmap for your future research or your current research, and then it will always be available for you. So there's long term availability. So to me, this DMP will help you, and it has helped me to comply with an agency, a funding agency. What are its requirements? It has helped me in sharing this data with collaborators. If you have collaborative research in the same domain, then it has helped me in doing that, and they generate their own result with that data. It also helps us in visibility and has obviously a lot of impact on your research. It helps me go back to the data which I had generated previously and then match it with the data or the results which I'm getting now, and we are able to generate newer ideas out of it. So, what would probably a DMP, comprise of? The description of the data. What are the types of data you're going to collect? So you can take, for example, a sensor. For example, so it could generate data for you in terms of temperature, humidity, any other kind type of data. How will that be generated, and what would be the size or the format? So if you have this already in your mind or somewhere written, then you're prepared to get this data and then store this data. How are you going to collect this data? So there are many researchers which I have seen, many students who go out in the campus and with the sensors, and they keep collecting this data, or you have a fixed sensor somewhere and it keeps generating this data and just giving this data to you. So how are you going to collect this data, right? And if you're collecting this data, is it ethical? So some of the data, I would again use the example of medical data. So is it following the ethical practice? And then are you also doing the protection part of this data? Then how are you going to store it? That's very important, because the data that you would have generated in 4 to 5 years would be just way too much for you to preserve somewhere. So how are you going to back it up? What would be the security? Are you going to pass it on from one, let's say if you're a supervisor, are you going to pass this data on from one print to another PhD student? If you are a PhD student, are you going to give this data back to your supervisor or to another PhD student? I don't know how it is going to work in your lab, so to say, or in your research group. So, how are you going to do this in the long term? So, all of this is ethical. So, we need to have a good plan of how you are going about this data. So that's exactly the next point. How are you going to share and access this? Is there a common repository? If there is a common repository within the team, then everyone should be aware of it. Are you going to publish it somewhere? GitHub is used these days and everything is online. I was mentioning about preprint, where your research is just free, but is it valid or not because it's not yet reviewed? So if you're doing all of that in your research team, amongst your researchers, collaborators, do you have the permission to do that, right? And then are you allowing people to access it? Okay. So a lot of times when we submit these articles, we also make a clause or a line that data is available upon request or data is not available, right? So many co-authors, I mean, many researchers, co-researchers would contact us saying, can you supply this data or a piece of code? So are we in a position to do that, or whose permission is required if I want to do it, right? So that sharing and access also needs to be done. How are you going to document it? Are you going to create a metadata? There are a lot of data that you have. So data about the data, is that the case in your research? And how are you going to facilitate its understanding and reuse? So this is not the case for me personally, because the data which I generate is not really, really long, but I make it very transparent in my research group how we are going to share. If we are going to put it out as a preprint, then we take the consent from everybody. If we are going to keep it not as a preprint, only as a journal article, do we throw it out that it is accepted before it is published? If not, then we wait for the publication. So all of this needs to be transparent among the team and also in terms of collaborators. My personal experience is to be absolutely transparent. If you have research collaborators, uh, from one institute to another institute, so that the collaboration is longer. So we need to be very, very transparent and ask, then act, rather than just do something and then the collaborator is not happy and so on and so forth. Then probably your data has ethical, legal considerations. You could throw it out as a resource. What are the responsibilities? So I'm not going depth into this because my data, for example, doesn't require much of ethical and legal considerations. But we do have resources. We do have some places where we have stored this data, and we do make it accessible to the researchers if they ask. For example, ResearchGate is where we are very active. So if we do get requests from co-researchers from the community, then we share this data, articles, and many other things. So, how could you create your DMP if you're interested? My experience is start doing this as early as possible. I don't know how research would work for you, but I would say if you're into the doctoral coursework process, you could start doing your data then itself. Otherwise, at least after the coursework, before you start your actual research. Uh, if you're a supervisor or a lab co-lab is aware of this, then talk to them and see how you can do that. Uh, there are some templates available. For example, I review the funds from the UK Royal Society, and they have templates for DMP for the researchers. So there could be case like that. So you could always look at that. So I believe in the last line that this DMP is basically a document, and I keep updating it as my research progresses. So uh, what I did during my doctoral study and what I'm doing now, there's a vast difference between that. But my data is already available, so I can always look back and see how that data was. Sometimes you don't even have to go back that much. Maybe just 6 months back, what you did and what you're doing now could be a large difference in terms of research. So this DMP really helps. Uh, Data protection and security, I think we've already spoken about this. Uh, so, key protection strategy, like I was saying really initially, if you're collecting the data, be very specific what you need to collect. Don't collect too much because, one, in terms of research, it would confuse you. In terms of the non research part, it was very difficult for you to now store that data which you do not need, because how do you do away with that data, right? So be very specific, use it only for the purpose that you require. It's best not to get any data which you really don't require. Try to minimize the data. Too much data, like I said, it's just going to confuse you. You know, if you are into any kind of research where you're going to take data from other people, human beings, then try to avoid the personal data unless it's really required. Ensuring the accuracy of the data is absolutely the responsibility of the researcher. uh, I don't know how your storage would look like, but I always try to limit the storage. uh, yeah. Too much of a storage, it becomes a burden, so try to limit that storage. And of course, the confidentiality of that data. Try to protect this data as much as you can. Try to avoid any loss, any damage. So I've also seen people storing it at multiple places, but then that's a very good idea. But always try to back up this kind of data. uh, Probably one or two places is more than enough. What could be the measures? Of course, storage is one, backing up is one. uh, when you store this data, try to be anonymous in its storage. Don't try to save it so that it's easily identifiable. Because if you're in a lab where hundreds of people are working, try not to use your, say, your name or somewhere somehow which is identifiable. You know how we store in folders and other things. uh, if you're transferring, ensure that it's being transferred securely. There are many security measures through which you can do a data transfer. Try to ensure that. So if we do all of this, I would believe the integrity is maintained. You are also able to handle the ethical part, and overall the trust of the participant would be measured in that case. So these are some key terms from whatever I have just delivered. I think the ones in red you would be familiar with if you have been submitting articles to journals and also highly rated conferences. You always need to give a data availability statement if you have data to be shared, or if you can give data to people if they contact you. DOI, this is a string, an object through which object identifier through which your article or your document will be identified. ORCID is something that I think, in my opinion, now everybody needs. It's a unique identifier, so we can be identified as a researcher. So if anyone doesn't have an ORCID ID, please do have it. It works exactly like any other social media. Try to have that. Um, Try to have your data which is pseudo, not having names or identifications through which it can be identified. uh, Try to have a DMP. See if it really helps you out. Personally, it has helped me a lot. I have changed my research domain from optical communication and networks during my doctoral study to wireless communication and networks. So there's a complete change, but I have always stored the data in both cases, and it has really helped progress my research. I've also shared it with some of my collaborators, some of my students, and it has really helped them as well to progress our research as well as their own research. So, see if this DMP really helps in your research. Next, I come to something important, writing, which I think Rahul sir would have already, uh, you know, touched upon this writing part, or if not, then in the coming days he would. So this is something very important when we, start writing. We are really excited to write, and we have so much in our mind. So I'm just, putting out uh, on a light way, how it's supposed to work. You're looking at the commands, the hands working really good, and you're able to type, and just sentences coming back and forth. But really, once you start writing, uh, it happens to everybody. There's a lot of confusion. Just writing a couple of sentences would take you hours. We're not able to put it in the right frame of mind. How it's supposed to look like. You write it, take a break, come back. It doesn't look good at all. So there's people spend weeks just writing abstract. So that's the neurobiology of writing. It happens with all of us. So just on a lighter side, you just want to take a vacation and don't write, but I suggest we always look for help from other researchers if they're open enough to help. Now we have these AI tools, as we were discussing initially, but I am old school. I always believe in writing by myself. I spend a lot of time writing by myself. It really helps in having a command over the research which I want to present. So every day spend about 1 or 2 hours in writing. It really helps over a period. You get that command. I'm sure all researchers who are very well experienced would also tell you basically the same thing. I know that Rahul sir does the same. He writes at least a couple of hours every day. So it really helps. If you give a gap in writing, then that gap remains and it becomes very difficult to write. Uh, so here we are talking about intellectual property when it comes to presenting your research. I'm sure everyone is aware of that. What is the creation that you have? What are the invention? Anything that you have in mind and you want to throw it out? Uh, there's a lot of talk about plagiarism, and I'm sure everyone is aware of this. Whether you're using someone's ideas, paraphrases, if you're doing that, cite them. Uh, it's a basic problem that's going on, and there's a lot of uh, you know actions and activities going on against it. So make sure we're not doing any of that. Also, if you're using AI based uh, as I said, I am not using it, but if you are doing it, make sure that you're following all the rules and regulations which are required. So see how your sentences can be phrased, how you are able to, you know, give uh, the credit to the authors, the co-authors in the research community, how you can give credit to their ideas, their concepts. I think everyone would be aware of this. So a lot of uh, actions, activities are, directed towards this by the journals, the patent office, and so on. So please take care of this. So like I said, follow a proper referencing order. You could have different references like IEEE, Harvard, APA, whichever is the style that is required in your domain. Uh, if you're using white papers from industry, also cite them. If you're using any content from the website, also cite them. So ensure that proper citation is mentioned. So these are some key terms. I think most of us would be aware of this copyright. So we need to follow these laws, ensuring proper citations and permissions wherever are required. So in my experience, especially during reviewing, I've seen that a lot of researchers use usually diagrams which are already existing in other articles. They make slight changes and then present it, and we always give a review back that this is already present and cite it. So kind of don't take that chance. If you're using a diagram which is already there, it's best to gain permission from the co-authors and from the journal where it is published. And once you have that, then you are free to use it in your work and give a proper citation to it. So in my experience, I've seen this mostly with the diagrams, but if you are using any text content, do go ahead and do the same. So I think this is a term which most of the researchers are used to, the Creative Commons license. If you are publishing your work as a preprint, then you have to use certain licenses, and this is the most common most popular used license, the Creative Commons license. It has its own specific license and some rights. So please ensure that you read these you know uh, the laws which are there, and what are the terms and conditions. For example, if you go into any publisher, they say that the authors have no issues if they publish their work in the form of a video. So make sure that you're okay with that, because then we don't know how this video is being used. So make sure you have read these terms and conditions. There should be a fair dealing in terms of whatever you are trying to do. Any copyrighted material is there, then make sure that you're using it fairly. I would say always try to get uh, the permission prior to doing or using this kind of work. Intellectual property, I think whatever data, whatever software, any creative work which you have, then make sure that a proper attribution is done. Make sure who is the owner to that, and how are you going to commercialize this, right? So make sure you are following all of this. Licensing, I think I've already touched upon this. This is a basic ethical responsibility that we have. The terms and conditions, please read this very carefully. We do this, I mean, we as in my team, we do this specifically when we publish preprint, because preprints are not already reviewed, they are out in the public before being reviewed and accepted. So we always look at the terms and conditions. Open access is another part which you would see in the terms of journals. So when you're doing an open access, you're basically sharing this for free with everybody. If you have a funder for your research, they always push for having open access, so that they gain the popularity, as well as your research becomes popular and more accessible. So when you do that, make sure all the ethics are being followed in terms of the research, because now you have a wider audience for your research. So I think I've already touched upon the plagiarism. Public domain, this is like preprint, which I gave you an example. Make sure that everything goes right in terms of the terms and conditions there. The next aspect which I have seen lately, lately I mean probably a year back, year and a half, the use of Gen AI in terms of research. I think we were talking initially about the use of AI tools. So I've seen this Gen AI tools being used by a lot of researchers. Uh, so it's good, it's exciting, but it also brings about many ethical considerations. So I think in my opinion, there should be a committee that we must have at the institute, school, or the university, to really look at these use of these AI tools, rather than just throwing out the research for some into some journal or some patent office and then they coming back to us. So we need this ethics committee. uh, there have been cases of accuracy and bias questions over it, the AI generated content, whether is it accurate, whether is it fair, and how do we incorporate this into the work. So these are some questionable aspects in terms of the Gen AI, which is used for content creation into the research. uh, it is it transparent, if it is, then we need to acknowledge this contribution and explain exactly how it was used. I have seen in many of the articles which I have reviewed, uh, I won't say it is not transparent. They have almost already stated that they have used AI tools, but the authors have really not explained in in what way was it used. So it's always good to be very clear exactly how you have used it. So that's the responsibility of the authors. Again, your AI tool may collect and process the data. How does it address the privacy issues? That remains to be seen. Again, the intellectual property part is, do you have the right to use any AI generated content, or are you infringing any rights from the others? So this is again a question which comes about in using that. Your the human oversight goes away. So is it ethical? Have we used it responsibly? uh, has there been any critical thinking, any judgment? So these are some questions which have come about, and I'm sharing this from a review point of view. These are what the reviewers are questioning, when the articles are being reviewed, as well as the editors, the area editors, the associate editors are always questioning this. So make sure as a researcher, you're very clear about it. So in my opinion, wherever we are affiliated to, we must have a really good guidance which we must provide towards using AI tools. Now we are also aware that students are using this even at now in at undergraduate level, right? So with what transparency or with what ethics are they actually using these AI tools? That remains to be seen. I mean, we could be generating research, in few days because of this AI content. So are we just flooding the research market with, articles and research? Is it valid? Is it accurate? That remains to be seen. I mean, it should be worthwhile, whatever we are trying to do. So let's not just use AI tools just to generate, some articles and flood the research community with not so you know not so good results, so to say. So I think the guidance must be provided properly, uh, like how we have used this AI tools, whether it aligns with the ethical principles. Uh, I think we should not use AI peer review. It really puts in a lot of concern about IP as well as confidentiality. But uh, there are a lot of reviewers who may be using it. As a reviewer as well, we are supposed to mention if we have used AI for the review. But I personally don't use it. I always give it a human inference to the reviews. Authorship, I have seen some articles where, people have stated AI as one of the authors. Don't do that. It should not be listed. I think the AI tools, it is the responsibility of the university, the school, department, wherever we are affiliated. Uh, we must give our researchers the proper pathway, roadmap, how to use these AI tools, whether it is valid, how is it ethical, what is the integrity, so that their research is reliable and valid, right? So there are some key points I think I've already covered. You have AI, I think everyone knows the bias, conventional AI, Gen AI. I think this is the one which is really going about now. Everyone wants to put out the Gen AI, in terms of creating new content, text, images, everything. LLMs, of course, it's a type of Gen AI. You have the plagiarism, the research ethics, the transparency. I think the transparency is the one that I would take away. We need to be very transparent in the use of AI tools, how the methods and the data have been created, what are the limitations of the AI tools. So make sure all of this is covered in your research. So lastly, I would touch upon these metrics. You would have heard of things like H index, I index, citations. So these are some metrics which we are using at our universities or schools to really measure the output of any research. So I will present what my opinion is. Of course, people have their own opinion on this. Uh, I believe that peer review remains essential. It should be there. Of course, there are a lot of concerns also on the peer review, but I think that remains an essential component. Uh, Metrics must be, as you know, aligned to the mission. Choose only those metrics which are relevant. Let's not choose those metrics which are, you know, which doesn't align with the research. So uh, earlier Google Scholar would be one of the metrics which we were using, and then suddenly everyone has a very high Google Scholar because they found some kind of ways to increase it, and then we just throw it away. So let's not do that. There are genuine researchers with good, H index, Google Scholars. So let's try to dig into that and see whether, because they are valid researchers. So let's not throw that away. Transparency, openness, verify the data of the researchers, analyze them, right? Let's not put all researchers into one basket. Let's try to evaluate them properly. Uh, there should be variations. Let's avoid using metrics, which are being used in some domains in a certain way, and use the same in another domains where absolutely it may not be valid, right? So we are looking at a very very high H index in domain 1, and we are expecting the same in domain 2. That may not be valid, right? There are certain domains which where the H index improvement takes a long time for obvious reasons. So let's have that open mindedness about it. Focus on the research portfolio. not just on the metrics. So let's not look at a metric, let's say for example H index, and very high H index doesn't mean the researcher is doing very well. So let's look at the portfolio, what he's trying to do, what is the overall work of this researcher, not just a single metric. So I believe we should not just look at the metric or completely rely on that. There are a lot of other assessments as well, which really defines a researcher. So let's try to do that. Uh, I think updating the metric and how to review should be done on a regular basis, and whichever metric is required for a particular domain, let's try to emphasize that on that, and in another domain maybe another metric is required. So let's try to do that. So that was all from my side in terms of the integrity part on academics and research. Uh, Please feel free to connect with me. I am available on LinkedIn as well as on ResearchGate. So these are two platforms where I'm, uh, you know, updating always and quite active. My current research is focused on wireless systems. I work on two aspects. One is on spectrum enhancement, that is allocation as well as management. If you want to call it 6G networks, I actually call it the intelligent systems, wireless systems. That is one aspect. The other one, which is very recent, as about a couple of years back, is known as semantic communications, which was a separate part, but researchers tried to see how it can be integrated into the wireless systems, and it's become very, very popular. There are very few researchers in India who are actually doing this. So we have a good collaboration going on in terms of semantic communications. So in fact, myself and Rahul sir are also involved in this. So feel free to connect with me, and if you want to take up any kind of research, or if you want to dig in more into this research, then I'm always available.